welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, we want to begin this evening with the story of Mike the Headless Chicken. It sounds implausible, but it really happened, and it tells you something. It begins this way. One afternoon in the fall of 1945, a farmer in western Colorado called Lloyd Olson walked into the barnyard to get dinner. His wife said she wanted some chicken, so Olson found a 5-month-old bird called Mike and then beheaded it with a hatchet. But then a funny thing happened. Mike didn't die. In fact, Mike lived another full year and a half. He lived long enough to become a traveling sideshow attraction before he ultimately choked to death in a motel room in Phoenix. A sad story. But the question is, how did Mike live for 18 months without a head? Well, scientists had a number of explanations for how he did it, but the real reason is simple. Mike had no idea he'd been killed, so he just kept going. Mike was too dumb to die. Something very similar just happened in the Russia investigation this week. For 2 years, we've been told that there was some form of collusion between the Russian government and the 2016 Trump campaign. Details were sketchy, so we paid for an independent counsel and a number of congressional investigations to find out exactly what happened. Then last week, Democrats hit pay dirt. They produced the perfect witness, the one man in America who would know exactly what happened between the Trump campaign and Russia, Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen was Donald Trump's personal lawyer for 10 years. Communications between Trump and Cohen were supposed to be privileged and protected, so Trump would have been free to tell Cohen anything and everything. If there's one person who would know firsthand about Russian collusion and all its detail, it's Michael Cohen. And if there's one person who'd be happy to tell Congress about Russian collusion in all its detail, it's also Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen hates Trump. He has said so repeatedly and vehemently. So last week, Democrats on Capitol Hill put Cohen under oath and asked him about Russian collusion. Here's what happened next.
Based on what you know, would Mr. Trump, or did he, lie about colluding and coordinating with the Russians at any point during the campaign?
So as I stated in my testimony, I wouldn't use the word colluding.
There you have it. Michael Cohen says there was no collusion with Russia. That is the final word. After 2 years, the most far-fetched spy story in American history ends abruptly. The Russia conspiracy is dead, killed with hatchet-on-stump finality on live television. But here's the twist. Nobody in Washington seemed to notice. They have no idea what just happened. Like Mike the Headless Chicken, they're still running around, bumping into things. In fact, they're still issuing subpoenas. Yesterday, the House Judiciary Committee sent out at least 81 of them. The subpoenas are aimed at individuals, organizations, and government agencies that might have damaging information about Donald Trump. Information that, for some reason, a reason nobody can explain, his personal attorney of 10 years did not have. Apparently, it's extra double secret information. If this all seems a little nuts, prepare yourself. We learned on CNN yesterday that it's simply the beginning.
In addition to the 81 names of entities and individuals released today, do you expect more?
Yes, in short order, there will be additional names, additional document requests that are made in the coming days.
Additional names, additional document requests. If you had to sum up the entire Democratic platform, those two sentences would do it. More subpoenas! Vote for us! We'll investigate! At some point, though, it's easy to lose track of what all these investigations are about. Can you remember? Search your memory for a moment. Last week, it was Russian collusion, the hacking of our democracy by Vladimir Putin, unseen saboteurs. This week, every bit as solemnly, it's obstruction of justice.
You say the president, has obstructed justice. You've been clear about that. But you said yesterday...
There's certainly a lot of evidence that he has, but that's exactly the kind of thing we have to look into.
Okay, so now you're not sure he's obstructed justice?
Personally, I think he has, but we have to look and see.
But the reason I ask is obviously if he obstructed justice, that's a crime. It's an impeachable act. You don't have to have a crime to be impeachable, but a crime is an impeachable act.
Not every crime is an impeachable act. That one would be.
That one would be. Okay.
So what are they telling us? Well, you can see what they're telling us. Impeachment's coming. And of course it is. Democratic leaders have assured us again and again they have no plans to impeach, but they're lying. Their voters demand impeachment. So really they have no choice. In some ways, an impeachment trial would be an upgrade from the creepy, secretive process we have now. Shadowy intelligence agencies won't be spying on anyone during an impeachment trial. Federal agents won't be rousting anyone from bed at rifle point. Impeachment is a public and fairly transparent process. We can watch it on television. We can assess for ourselves what we think of Jerry Nadler and his friends. Best of luck to Democrats on that. But take 3 steps back. What's the cost of all of this to the rest of the country? Well, it's hard to assess that, really, but a story in the paper this morning does give you some hint of it. It's this. In 2017, the combined death rates from alcohol, drugs, and suicide in this country hit their highest recorded levels ever since record-keeping began. But you know this if you live here. If you haven't been to the funeral of someone who's died from booze, drugs, or suicide lately, count yourself lucky, because they're everywhere. The surreal thing is that nobody on television ever mentions any of this. It's like it's not even happening. Maybe that's because in their world, it isn't happening. Everything is fine where they live. People there are prosperous and secure and happy, and they plan on staying that way. They resent any attempt to remind them that in the world beyond the coastal cities, America is killing itself. That means the people who built this country are dying. The people in charge of this country are ignoring them as they die. You've got to wonder how long this can continue. It's too frivolous. It's too dishonest. They keep telling us the only thing that matters is Trump. They know that isn't true. They just don't want to talk about the rest of it because they're implicated in it.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar sparking bipartisan backlash again for anti-Semitic comments, this time igniting a Twitter feud over the weekend with fellow Democrat from New York, Nita Lowey, after suggesting U.S. politicians were being forced to, quote, pledge allegiance to Israel. Congresswoman Lowey firing back Sunday, tweeting, "I believe we can debate important policy without using offensive, painful stereotypes." This latest feud comes less than a month after Omar was called out for writing, quote, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby," suggesting lawmakers are bribed to support the country of Israel. Here to weigh in is Harvard Law School emeritus professor and author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump, Alan Dershowitz. Alan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What's going on here?
Well, she is very anti-American. Put aside the anti-Israel. She's so anti-American. She accuses American members of Congress, men and women, Jewish, Christian, she accuses them, essentially, of doing it for the money. We know that Americans overwhelmingly support Israel because Israel is a democracy. It's America's strongest ally in the Middle East. It's the only country in the Middle East that America can always count on. You never know who's going to be the head of Egypt next month.
Right.
You never know what's going to happen in other countries. But you know that no matter who's elected in Israel, they're going to be very supportive of America. They're going to exchange intelligence information, military information. And her attack on supporters of Israel is an attack on America. And she accuses them of dual loyalty. Well, she supports Hamas. She supports other terrorist groups that are anti-American. If supporters of Israel are guilty of dual loyalty, which they're not, what about supporters of America's enemies? So, you know, her arguments are absurd. They're down at bottom. They're anti-American. And, of course, they're anti-Israel, which is America's strongest ally. And I think the response in Congress has been appropriate to condemn her and to marginalize her, and to make sure people understand she didn't run on this platform. This is a bait and switch. She's gotten in Congress now, and she's taken on herself to present the strongest anti-Israel case in modern history that any member of Congress has ever tried to present. And she's being rebuffed, except by the radicals in the Democratic Party who are jumping to her support. Some of them just on free speech grounds, but others on the merits.
Well, she has gone back and forth with members of Congress from her own party over the last 72 hours. And, in fact, there's a tweet from, I believe, yesterday where she tripled down on some of her comments. She said, "Our democracy is built on debate, Congressman." Here she is referring to Nita Lowey of New York. "I should not have been expected to have allegiance, pledge support to a foreign country in order to serve my country in Congress or serve on committee. The people of the 5th elected me to serve their interest. I am sure we agree on that." Do you think that Nita Lowey is going to agree with her on that?
No, nobody has to take a pledge of any kind of pledge to serve in Congress in the United States. But she told her constituents when she ran that she would support America, and she is not. She is supporting America's enemies and undercutting American values. You know, the fact that she supports enemies of America and doesn't look herself in the mirror and say, my God, if I'm accusing people of dual loyalty, where are my loyalties? Are my loyalties to America, or are my loyalties to the Palestinian Authority, to Hamas, to Hezbollah? I'm not accusing her of dual loyalty. She has the right to express support for enemies of America. That's part of her role as a free person in Congress. But for her to accuse Jewish members of Congress and non-Jewish members of Congress of dual loyalty because they support America's allies, would you accuse somebody of dual loyalty if they supported England, if they supported France and other American allies? It's the worst canard, and it really goes back to some of the anti-Semitic tropes of the early 20th century and late 19th century, and she ought to be ashamed of herself. And the Democrats must marginalize her and distance her from the center of the party. And I hope she'll be primaried. And she should be beaten in a primary by people who support the United States and people who support American allies rather than people who support America's enemies.
Well, let's see what happens. Alan Dershowitz joining us from Miami. Sir, thank you very much for the point of view.
Thank you.